Thank you. Thank you.
So, Adam and I have known each other for a long time, and I read his book, The Passion Economy. How many people have read the book or are familiar with the book?
Couple.
That's not bad.
That's not bad.
That's not
It
bad.
just came out.
And I thought it was really, of all the things I've read about kind of where America's at right now, one of the more hopeful pieces of work that I've seen. And I was curious about with Adam, like, what was the moment after the collapse, 07, 08, where you thought that there could be, you know, in the sense of a volcanic eruption or fires where there would be growth? What was that moment that hit you?
It was, I spent so much of the last, 20 years covering terrible things that are going on. The Iraq War, the financial crisis, the earthquake in Haiti, Katrina, and was so consumed by the financial crisis. It was right when I created Planet Money and just working, 12-hour days, 15-hour days, just trying to understand and then convey how our economy was collapsing. And it, I'm sure, was a couple years, like 2010, where I started noting at first these weird moments where I'm telling this main story, the main story of both the acute financial crisis, the lack of prosecution, and the disproportionate pain. And you become familiar as a reporter that the people you're interviewing tell similar stories. And then every once in a while, I'd meet someone who's telling a story about how they're thriving, someone who doesn't fit the model that I had in my head. These weren't wealthy people. These weren't the 1% working at Goldman Sachs. These were regular folks who had kind of figured something out. And it was at first just the occasional, I'd notice them, I didn't know what to do with it. I remember I did a few stories for Planet Money. I wrote a few columns when I had a column at the New York Times. But eventually it started to feel like, oh, there's this thing happening that seems to be a trend. And over time, I came to see it as the flip side of the same story I had been telling, that our economy had a logic for much of the 20th century. And this is something you and I have talked about a million times, about how the 20th century is kind of this weird blip in human history where we had this sort of, in many ways benign, but in other ways not so benign, economy that was built around large corporations in a kind of stable growth environment where a huge percentage of people were able to see over the course of their lifetime their incomes grow, their opportunities grow. And that started to fray in the 70s, 80s, and then really acutely in the 2000s. And that caused a lot of pain, a lot of dislocation. But like any massive shift, any transformation from one economic logic to another causes pain, but it also causes opportunity. And that's when I started cluing into the complete story has a ugly side and it has a happy side. And in journalism, you just tend to focus on the ugly side. But then I wanted to tell also this optimistic side, which is a key part of the same story.
And what was there a moment in all the stories that you were hearing that kind of struck you? Like, was there one kind of gleaming moment amidst, because I think we all remember 07, 08 when the stock market collapsed, when people were losing homes. My father lost his home, everything changed. What was the moment that you saw sort of some optimism?
It was later, but I remember I had this column I wrote for the New York Times Magazine. I went to a brush factory in the Bronx in New York, and Kirshner Brush, and it was this old factory. You couldn't believe it still existed. I don't remember if this was 2011 or 2012. It was the guy was in his 70s, maybe early 80s, and was still making brushes. He was very proud of the machine he bought in 1983 or something that was his most recent purchase. And he made these paint brushes for municipalities that would paint bridges. You know, there really is this thing where there are these bridges, you start painting them, and by the time you get to the end of the bridge, you have to go back and start. And this was like a solid business for him forever, and for his dad and his dad's dad. And then a very familiar story. China started exporting brushes at first.
By the way, I love this part of his book where he talks about how China initially was like a joke.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, they're crappy brushes,
Yeah.
but then they got better and better and better.
Yeah,
Yes.
and these municipalities at first are like, we're not going to buy a bunch of cheap brushes, and then we got bristles on the wall and streaks. And so this guy, Israel Kirshner, couldn't figure out how to deal with China, and his business just got worse and worse and worse. And he was down to his last customers, you know, these small municipal buying operations. I remember interviewing a guy who said, look, my dad bought from his dad, my grandfather bought from his grandfather, I'm gonna stay with him. But that was it. He was done. And it was hilarious. He would show, like, his two kids who were in their 40s or 50s were working in the office.
Where are you again? Like, what part of the world?
This was the Bronx in New York.
The Bronx, okay.
And he points at his kids. He goes, my loser kids. They don't know nothing about brushes. And and he was done. And that's a story we know. We know that story. Proud American business, lasted forever. China comes in, it's done. His workers are laid off, it's gone. But I was like wondering, and I called, there's these brush industry magazines. There's like 3 major ones. And
What are they called? We have to ask.
they're literally, so the big one is Broom, Brush, and Mop. That is, you can,
We all know that.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
But what are the other ones called?
Yeah.
Because broom, brush, and mop, we all know.
this is a sore subject because McKay tried to option some stories from Broom, Brush, and
Said
Mop.
you would not bring that up.
No, I know you're pissed off. You couldn't get
The other magazine is called Grab the Handle and Move.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I called the editor of Broom, Brush, and Mop, and I was like, is this industry just dying?
Wait. You called the editor of Broom, Brush, and Mop?
Yeah.
And does he have a staff around him?
It's a big industry, yes.
All right, I'm
There's
sorry.
the big annual Interbrush conference in Germany. It's a big, there's brushes everywhere. And I was like, because I had seen these statistics that the number of brush manufacturers in America had collapsed, but there were still a lot. And I was like, what's going on? He goes, you got to talk to Lance Chaney. That guy's a genius from the brush industry.
Well, we all know that.
Yeah.
Lance Chaney's the guy you talk to. Yeah.
And I go out.
And can I surprise you? Ladies and gentlemen, Lance Chaney.
He was at my book event in New York.
No, for real?
He was, yeah. Wow. But he was not willing to come to LA. It was like first class. So, Lance.
Ladies and gentlemen, Lance Chaney.
So Lance had the same story. His dad, Max Chaney, was running the family business. Their brushes were focused on the food industry. They had a famous pizza oven cleaning brush. They had a lot of brushes for the chocolate industry to kind of brush chocolate onto pastries. But like most 20th century businesses, their main focus was market share. Let's just make lots and lots of these things, make them as cheaply and quickly as possible, sell as many as possible. And Lance is a fascinating character in a million ways, but he would sit and have lunch with his dad, Max, and they loved each other, they got along well, but basically Lance would say, Dad, we got to get out of this commodity brush game, China's going to kill us. And his dad would say, we're fine, we've been doing it for 100 years, we'll do it for 100 more. And Max died at work, very old, and Lance instantly took over the company and said, we're done. We're not, any brush that a Chinese company makes, we're not making. Which means China's only looking at their best sellers, so that means that's saying all our best sellers we're gonna stop making. And Lance said, we're gonna find brush solutions to major problems. And it turns out there are a lot of brush solutions to major problems. He found, actually, this was just accidental. He gets a phone call from essentially Homer Simpson, a nuclear safety officer at a nuclear power plant, who says, hey, I looked you up. You're a brush company. We have this brush problem. We use this brush to clean the pipes, to inspect them, but they're shedding staples, and we now have these staples sloshing around our liquid coolant. And that's really dangerous. We don't want that. And so Lance designs this the special brush to clean nuclear power plant pipes. It costs him $12 in material, but he's like, what do I charge? He's like, I could charge anything. So he just said, how about $6,000? And
was that the real number?
yeah, that's the real number.
Okay.
And they buy several, and it's now standard in many nuclear power plants.
Wow.
And sure, some Chinese company might be able to make that for $3 or $8, but the problem is so much bigger than the money that they'd rather just stick with Lance. Lance somehow found out that NASA had a brush problem. They were designing the
We all knew that,
yes,
by the way.
Yeah, no, I know.
It's
I'm
been
late to
all
all
over
of this.
Twitter, like
Yeah,
NASA. Yeah.
They were designing the Mars rover, and the Mars rover comes up to a piece of rock on Mars and wants to do something to inspect the rock, but there's dust in the way. And so Lance worked with NASA to design a special brush that cleans the rock. There's now 2 of Lance's brushes, like very, very specialty brushes up on Mars. And this is more prosaic, but he created a brush for the Frito-Lay potato chip line that the potato chips, they had this brand new machine to make potato chips, but all the potato chips were like bulging up in one corner and crumbling. And so
That's not cool.
That's not cool. That's not good.
No.
And he created this like soft brush that like would push them out of the way. So this is what he does. And it's, on the one hand, he's still making brushes. On the other hand, he's completely transformed his business from we make something that we designed 50 years ago and we just make it over and over and over again, to we solve problems, we figure out solutions. And Lance, he knows 3 things. He knows bristles, he knows handles, and he knows the way you hold bristles onto handles. And it's 3 simple things, but it's infinitely complex. He can talk to you about boar bristles and beaver bristles and nylon bristles and Tampico bristles, and it's interesting for a while. Eventually, And that to me is the essence. Like when I say passion economy, a lot of people, oh, you mean Etsy making crafts? Actually, I don't think Etsy's a great example.
He means Etsy.
I don't mean Etsy.
He does.
No, I don't.
He does.
I don't.
And I think his Etsy book is so great because
I just want, just to set the stage, he'll ask questions, but if he ever makes a statement, that's not on behalf of me. I just want to make that.
Clearly you don't mean that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm curious about, like, so you have this kind of flicker amidst the darkness after the collapse. Of all the stories that we see in your book, was there one that like really kind of sparked you? Like, I mean, we talk about like brush makers, accountants, and all these people. Was there one that like really ate you?
I think the accountant, and a few people have said, like, I can't believe my favorite chapter is about an accountant. But it's this guy, Jason Blummer, who he had a dream to be, he was a bassist in a heavy metal Christian rock band.
I remember this.
And there was like a moment in the early 90s when that was a thing, but they just happened to be lousy. And he suddenly found...
By the way, I'm a huge Christian heavy metal guy. It's still a thing. Don't let him dissuade you in any other direction.
Although all your CDs are like 30 years old, but
They're still good.
They're
Anyway,
still- yeah.
Adam Davidson,
Yeah.
ladies and gentlemen.
and Jason, he thinks he's going to be a big rock star. That very quickly that unravels. He's suddenly married with a pregnant wife. I need a job. My dad's an accountant. I don't know what an accountant is. My dad doesn't seem to like his job, but I think that's what you do. You just do a job that sucks. So he majors in accounting and finds out, oh, it does suck. I really hate this, and I'm not good at it. And he went to North Greenville Tech, which, as I often tell him, is like the 8th best college in Greenville, and South Carolina, and it takes him 6 tries to pass the CPA exam, and he finds himself a sort of standard CPA at a mid-sized firm in upstate South Carolina, doing the most boring work. He hates every minute of it, but that's life. You're a dad, you got kids, you do a shitty job, and that's what you do. And hopefully on the weekends you can have some fun. And then he just starts wondering, like, what if no one wants what I do? I do tax returns, I do audits, I do payroll. Nobody wants it. They have to do it. And I charge them by the hour because that's what you do. And my boss says I have to work 70% of my working hours because that's what you have to do. And he just started wondering, what if people loved what I did? What if my clients really valued what I did? What would that be? And he didn't even know how to think about that. And if you met him when he started this journey, you'd be like, what are you talking about? Like,
But he really had that question.
He had that
really
question.
Wondered why what I'm doing is a drag. What if it wasn't a drag?
What if I loved it, and what if I worked with people who genuinely valued it and weren't just like, oh, fuck, I got this tax return. Can you be the guy who does the tax return?
So like meter maids would be like, what if people loved meter
maiding?
maids?
Yes, exactly.
Yes. And they show up and they're
Yeah.
like, hey. And
Yeah. So
here's some champagne.
Right.
And yeah.
So he goes on a very long and very unwise journey, frankly. Takes him like 10 years, but he quits his job and he starts his own company and it goes terribly and it's really a disaster. And the financial crisis came very close to destroying him. But eventually what he clicks into is, I don't like doing the rote work of accounting, but I have a sense of money. I know how money works. I know how business works. I know how profit and loss works. And I love hanging out with creative people. And this country is filled with creative people who are really good at their creative thing and are terrible at managing their own business. So what if I just worked with those people and didn't work with anyone else? And CPAs, like so many professions, have historically been very geographical. Like your clients are in this region. And he's like, okay, so I can't do that because there's not enough of those people in Greenville. So he creates a national firm. And he also is like, I have like 500 clients who I barely interact with. I can only do this with a small number of clients. He wants 40 clients.
Wow.
But that means I have to charge them a lot. But if I charge them a lot...
So he cuts his client list from 500 to 40.
And he gets rid of like 499 of those 500 because they're not the right ones.
Wow.
And I'm now one of his clients. I mean, after writing the book, I was like, I'm a creative guy. I'm technically an economics expert, but I'm really shitty at actually managing money. So I'm going to hire him. And
by the way, Adam Davidson owns a chain of froyos. They're not great.
They're not great.
Yeah.
Yeah. It turns out there is really crappy options when you get the frozen yogurt powder. And that creates a crisis. How do I convince people to pay me many multiples of what I was charging? How do I actually create value in their lives? And that, to me, again, is the essence of the story of the book. And he was the one, so basically what he is, I mean, honestly, I feel like I just basically wrote a book stealing a lot of his ideas. And
Sure.
Yeah. Because he is a guide.
That's how books work.
That's how books work.
Yeah.
He is a guide for people who are confronted by what we're all confronted by, a rapidly changing, confusing economy. And he helps them like calm down and focus on what's the value you're creating, and how do you capture that value in a way, in a relationship with the people who most value the thing.
I mean, hearing you talk about this, what really strikes me is the idea that we're all told through traditional capitalism that you should have the most amount of customers regardless. And what you're really talking about is that there is a line in there. I mean, is that?
Yeah, I mean, so some of the hidden logic of the 20th century, you have Adam Smith, and I love Adam Smith, but he had this model of an economy that was it was a model. It wasn't how the economy actually works, where there's just one marketplace, everyone's just producing equally exchangeable goods, bread, and every piece of bread is the same as every other piece of bread, every shirt is the same as every other shirt. And the famous supply and demand curve, that price is at the point where supply meets demand, and as economists define it, it's at the point of indifference, that what in the economic theory is you price where the very last potential customer is like, okay, fine, I'll take it. I'm not that into, all right, if I pay you $1, you'll give me this bottle of water. Okay, fine. I'm not that into it, but that's fine. If you charge $1.01, I'm not gonna buy it. But for $1, I'll buy it. But what's implied in that is that higher up on the curve, there are people who would pay $500 for the bottle of water. They really want it. They really value it. And also, as we've learned, markets are not just this open, undifferentiated world of equally transferable goods. And this particular, water is not a great example. Bottles of water is probably not a great example, but there's some number of people who would pay $500 for this. Let me find those people, and which was not technically possible until very recently, and just work with them and stay in communication with them, because those are the people who really love what I do, but their life is changing, their problems are changing, so I have to stay in that constant communication with them. And that is a fundamentally different economy than the mass production economy of the 20th century.
So let me throw out the monster on the other side that's fighting against what you're talking about, which is the conglomerate, which is the commodified conglomerate that is like trying to roll over everything that you're talking about, which is, specific personal economies, right?
Yeah.
I think that's
a
fair way to call it. How, like with the case examples you gave, how did they fight off the conglomerates or the commodification of their products? And for a second, because I didn't know this until I worked with Adam on The Big Short. He was our advisor on that movie and taught me a lot about economics, and he taught me about commodities, which I had never really thought of as anything other than a word or kind of a system. And what he told me about commodities was that it's a product that hits kind of a set price point. You jump in.
Sure. Yeah.
God, I seemed cool for like a minute, didn't I?
Yeah.
No, I ran out of gas.
Yeah.
I ran out of gas.
Yeah. Generally, so a commodity market it's like that market that Adam Smith defined. Karl Marx in Das Kapital talks about, imagine a 1 mark store. I guess they had like 99-cent stores at the time, and like where he does this essay about this, thinking about, this is telling us that everything here is worth the same as everything else. Everything here is worth 1 mark. And but the basic logic there is, if you are producing a commodity, and classic commodities would be grains or metals, but economists talk about commodities,
pork or
yeah. But commodities as an undifferentiated product. So a generic white T-shirt, or a generic accountant who just does the standard stuff,
Yeah.
or
or a generic audience that fills a theater, and it's just
it's just whatever.
no offense,
No
but
offense. No,
yeah,
no. But
you're
I think,
a commodity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Every one of you.
Yeah.
All your individual feelings and like dramas are all grouped together as a commodity.
And are irrelevant. I think we can use the word irrelevant.
irrelevant.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're on a balance sheet.
Yeah.
Your entire soul is on a balance sheet.
Yeah. Although I'll point out that this theater's just here, and there's like two people talking, and we just happen to be the two people talking right now.
Yeah. You're all commodities. Anyway, moving
Although
on.
I will say they pay us a lot to do these events.
And I don't want to make things awkward, but he was paid $35,000 for tonight, and I'm paid $20,000.
Yeah.
And you're commodities.
Yeah. So.
And we were paid nothing.
No, but thrilled to do it.
In case there's 1 in 30 of you that believe that. No,
Okay.
No. Yeah.
But the 20th century was built around commodities. So there's mass production of a similar set of goods, and you are what economists call a price taker. You go to market with your soap or your whatever, and the price is what the market price is. You don't have a lot of influence over it. Your customer is that indifferent customer, so you don't have an ability to really engage them. And so the way to make money is to focus on the production side. If I can make my soap or my pasta or my cars or my whatever a little bit cheaper than yours, we're both going to get the same price because we don't really have that much price control. But if I can get my production cheaper, then I get a little bit of bigger profit. I can invest in even better production, and hopefully I eventually get to the point where I really dominate a market. But you might find it, and so that is a tough race. But it had a lot of benefits. I mean, for Henry Ford to get rich, he eventually learned, I actually have to make a lot of other people, maybe not rich, but middle class.
I actually think this is one of the key moments in American history, or even industrial history, is the moment that Henry Ford, who was kind of a messed up guy in a lot of ways.
Wasn't crazy about Jews.
And realized that I'm paying my workers $1 an hour, and they're showing up drunk.
It was like $1.50 a day.
Let me have my moment.
Okay, all right.
Let me talk to the commodity. And so they were being paid like this crappy money. And Henry, is there any story of how he came to this conclusion? He figured out that if I pay them more, they'll do a better job. Production will drive forward faster. And it changed everything, right?
It changed everything. And so if you think of early industrialization, you basically have semi-literate peasants going into factories. People who farmed for a living on their own. And
I feel like you just called the crowd semi-literate.
No, I'm calling their
anyway,
grandparents.
Let's just move on. Roll past it. Yeah.
Their grandparents were semi-literate peasants. And, I actually know a lot about your ancestry, and
He actually does.
Semi-literate would be a lucky
My
break.
grandparents were semi-literate.
Yeah.
They were linen weavers in Ireland. He's totally right. But anyway.
So, and they didn't know about, it wasn't a standard that you show up at this time and you leave, and that you come every day. And so he said, oh no, I need you to come, especially if I have a conveyor belt and I got 50 people on the line, I need all 50 to show up. And he wanted to pay them terribly. He'd much rather pay them terribly. But he learned he had to pay them the insane amount of $5 a day to get them to just show up. And that was throughout. Procter & Gamble, whatever, GM.
And the other companies were mad at him, too.
Mad at
I read
him,
this, that they were like, what are you doing?
Exactly. And you see for much of the early, what we call the second industrial revolution, like 1880 to say 1970-ish, there's just always more demand for labor than supply. And that creates a space for labor unions. It creates a space for bargaining power. I'm not saying it's all wonderful or easy, but you see, like, for really rich people to get rich, they have to make a lot of other people, if not rich, at least better off. But now, like, Mark Zuckerberg doesn't need to make anyone else rich. And, Snapchat doesn't need to make anyone else rich. And Goldman Sachs doesn't need to make anyone else rich. So I do think big scale is bigger and scalier than ever. The strategy people at Google and Facebook their constraint of their potential market is literally how many hours a day are human beings awake? And how can we monetize all of that time? And that is a crazy constraint. So that,
by the way, also terrifying.
And terrifying, yes, absolutely. But that's when you think about what's your...
By the way, full disclosure, Adam and I are staying with Mark Zuckerberg at his condo up the street.
Yeah.
Whatever, we're just talking
We're just
freely.
talking. Exactly. Yeah,
and
and he's actually given us a report on this audience that was really interesting.
Really?
And actually, we shaped, there's 6 of you that we just, for fun, this afternoon, we shaped how you see the world. And you, so that is very real, and that is a real force, but the kind of the structure that brought others along with it is broken. And so we as, you can decide, I want to be a billionaire, I'm going to do that. But what I'm arguing is you can also just be like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do this other type of economy where I might use some of those tools. I mean, a lot of the people in the book will use Facebook ads and Twitter and other social media tools to find their customers. But I'm not going to, I'm going to focus on creating the value I uniquely can create that other people can't create, find the people who most value it, and figure out how to really match me to them and come up with a price rooted in the value I'm creating.
So let me ask you with that, is there a chance that what you're talking about with the passion economy, could it overtake the commodified conglomerate economy? Or, and the example I would give is like beer, right? Like beer is, they have microbreweries, they have these big companies, and the big companies keep trying to buy the microbreweries. How do you see that battle between the two? Because I totally agree with you. There's the kind of, you could also call it a bespoke economy or an artisanal economy. And what is the give and take between the two, the conglomerates and the passion economy?
And so I think this is the kind of the book we're all writing together at the time. And I find I have optimistic ways of thinking about it and pessimistic ways of thinking about it. I think, so the optimistic way is that much of the 20th century mass production, large corporation, a single brand that everyone on earth drinks Coca-Cola and uses Ivory soap and goes to McDonald's, was actually a byproduct of the technology of the age. That if you think up until, say, the 1880s, almost all manufactured goods and all services were very locally provided. There was always a tiny, tiny, tiny luxury goods industry that was traded. Even in pre-farming days, we see evidence of trading among nomadic, hunter-gatherers. But that's for very high-value luxury goods. For most people, most of the stuff was either made at home or made by a neighbor. You'd know the grandparents of the people who made your goods. And then suddenly, all of a sudden, in 1880s, trains and the beginning of mass production, Procter & Gamble, people are going to the general store or whatever in their village, and there's products that are made by strangers in another place. And how do I trust that? How do I know it's not crap?
And that's Sears and Roebuck.
Sears and Roebuck.
That catalog was
and
like
branding and this, the whole structure of the modern economy. Like Ivory soap is considered the first branded product by a lot of people. They spent a fortune saying, look, this is a thing called Ivory soap, and we really stand behind it. And once you build that brand, you sell it everywhere. But today, and this is the positive side of artificial intelligence and the internet and outsourcing and global trade, you can do much more complex matching. Like I mean, I don't really care that much about soap, but there's probably soaps.
I do.
You do.
But
You care a lot. You talk about
mean,
it.
We're different people. I
Yeah.
do. You don't.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I care about clothes. Yeah. No, you were telling me today that you found, to your shock and slight horror, that you were targeted with ads for
That's true.
people who are tall and you have, like, they figured out what clothes.
No, I'm 6'5". I'm 250. I shut down my Facebook account because Facebook is evil. It just is. And but I lazily left an Instagram account going, and I just occasionally go on it. And they were giving me ads, and they were like, I'm 6'5", 250, but I like comfortable clothes, and it was like spot on. Every single ad was like, oh shit, that's good. And I was like, oh, all right. And they got me. They got me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the optimistic case is AI and other blah, 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 that you can match lots and lots of people. So you're living in a world where you're matching with producers who meet your needs. I'm matching with producers who meet my needs. That all of us are living in a world, and this doesn't have to be just, oh, we're rich and we're getting like high-end consumer goods. It could be, in fact, a lot of the most interesting stuff is happening in Africa, where there's sort of a fascinating revolution in consumer packaged goods. And
Wait, what is that? I don't know.
there's sometimes called the bottom of the pyramid, but there's figuring out micro size products, specific. So if you're like, one thing, whatever we think about soap, we basically are not thinking how much like it costs to bathe. Like we don't. It's
Sure.
not like. But if you're living on $1 a day or $3 a day, saving a penny a bathe is a big deal. And so
Davidson told me something very interesting about soap, which these are the kinds of conversations we have. Yeah. And it was when we were working on the Big Short. He was telling me how, like, why do all soap ads tell you like it's pure, it's clean? And he was telling me that, like, back in the day, soap would have like hunks of like pig hoofs in it and like hair, because they were distilling it from exactly. They were distilling it from like animals and oils, and I was like, holy shit.
Like soap would rot and stink, and and so, and Procter & Gamble gets into this, but there's more innovative companies that, for us, we see, oh, it's a gel soap, it's a this soap, it's a that soap. But if you can create a soap that allows you to bathe your family for a penny less, and maybe also smells a little better, or whatever, is packaged in a way that there's less waste, it's enormously valuable.
So that's happening in Africa.
In
right
Africa,
now? You're starting
there's what computers. I mean, computers can create massive scale and monopolies, but it also, the logistics revolution that allows you to actually efficiently transport goods to villages all over Africa allows companies to actually say, oh boy, if we could improve the packaging and the chemistry of this soap product, and we could get we could sell to a much bigger audience. So it's, now I'm not, we live in a very unequal world, and it's much better to be well off than not well off, but these principles don't necessarily mean, oh, rich people have a bunch of nice sweet stuff, and then the poor will just have the standard old commodity. And so I can live in a world where I can be in a place where I think, oh, there's an optimistic world where it just is more and more efficient for most of us to get the thing we value most. And if you're rich, that might be a luxury thing, but if you're poor, that might be something that just provides serves a need you have that's different and is more cost effective. The flip side of that, or the negative side of that, though, is that is ultimately political, that even if it's true that the 20th century technology created a bunch of companies that don't have to exist that way now, what we know about wealth and power is just having wealth and power allows you to perpetuate your wealth and power.
Absolutely.
And so they don't necessarily want that change.
So that's a market inefficiency, is that you have these entrenched monopolies and powerful forces that are distorting the market.
Yeah.
Because that was the question I wanted to ask you, was that you and I were talking earlier about the idea that I read this article that was about brand loyalty versus consumer loyalty. And it was in some obscure kind of marketing magazine that I found. And what they were talking about was that brand loyalty is one of the most powerful forces on earth. That once you choose to like back a brand, your mind is just done. Like you're gonna do it. Whereas if it's consumer loyalty, you're looking at the cost, you're looking at the benefit, you're looking at the quality. And I retweeted it. I was like, this describes the American political situation perfectly. But beyond that, I was curious about like everything you're talking about, because with the passion economy, what you're really talking about is a personalized connection with the consumer. And I'm curious if you've noticed a difference between certain consumers that won't abide by that. Like, are there a group of people that don't want to hear it? Like they're using Crest, it's over, or there's a new toothpaste they've been marketed and they're open to it. Have you encountered that at all?
I mean, I think the data is clear. Like, I actually did look into micro brews and large beer companies, because there was an antitrust case, I don't know, 5 years ago. It was in the Obama
Well, this is
administration,
what
of
we
course.
were talking about that as well. Yes. Yeah.
Where, and the U.S. government was suing, I'm trying to remember, was it Budweiser or AB InBev, the Brazilian company bought Budweiser?
InBev owns everything.
Everything.
Like
and they were going to
InBev.
buy Corona. I think that's what it was.
Yep.
And the government was saying, no, you can't, because then you'll have a monopoly. And I remember at the time, my thought was like, what are they talking about? There's like 1 million brands. There's, nobody drinks Bud, but obviously I am a coastal elite. And and I talked to the chief economist of the Department of Justice at the time, who was like, oh no, people only drink Bud. like all of the microbrewery stuff, all of everything you've ever heard of is like this, the spill from one day's production of Budweiser. It's irrelevant.
Wow.
And so we do live in a world where the vast majority of purchases are of mass-produced goods.
Or brand loyalty.
Brand loyalty, yeah. And
I'm
I was
curious
thinking
about that
because
intersection between brand loyalty and just having.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do think, and I was thinking that. I bought,
We actually have a guest here. This is Robert Biegler.
I'm the economic hypnotist. So how's everybody doing?
And Rob is a friend of ours who's a writer that we just love and a cool guy. And so at one point I said, step out, Rob, and ask us a question that breaks our rhythm, which he's just done.
I really
perfectly
did,
well.
because I'm going to be...
I was going somewhere.
I'm so sorry. Oh, keep going. I'm
No,
sorry.
go.
No.
Okay,
No,
all right.
what's
Well,
your-
I honestly thought...
So you've heard everything we've said.
Yes.
We've been talking back and forth. What do you want?
Well, I
different?
got so fixated on Catherine Schwarzenegger Pratt and Jessica Simpson coming out in a couple weeks that I kept thinking about what the question I was going to ask them was going
Is
to be.
Jessica Simpson gonna
Well,
be
I think
here?
she's in Beverly Hills, they were saying. She
Okay.
gets sort of the nicer stage. So I actually did have a question, kind of a macro question, and that was that we have heard quite a bit, I think, in recent months about the inverted yield curve and sort of interest rates stagnating and the potential for a recession. And so I'm curious, how inevitable is that recession? How impending is that recession? It's probably not coming in the election cycle, for better or worse. Are we prepared to handle that recession? If not, how do we prepare for it and how do we adapt? And then what role does the passion economy play in it, if any?
Sure.
Thank you, Robbie Biegler.
Robbie Biegler. All right.
I'll take my
Thank you,
question
Rob.
off the air.
So to sum up, what Rob's asking is, how does the passion economy, the personalized economy, deal with a large catastrophic event, right? I
Right.
think that's,
Yeah.
that's a fair, by the way, very nice question, Rob.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once again, Rob Beagler.
Rob Beagler.
Yeah. Big Trump supporter, openly racist, but we appreciate your applause for him. Thank you. Yeah.
So, yeah, we are wildly overdue a recession, and I think everybody who does forecasts thinks we're going to have a recession, and is sort of surprised it's taken this long. We're still in a sort of unnatural economy. We're still on the life support that was put in place after the financial crisis, and a lot of the positive economic news is the result of essentially transfers from the poor to the rich through the tax code and deregulation, which are not real growth. It's not real value added.
That's the big thing I keep talking about is like, when you know the government isn't going to regulate anything, you're going to have a bubble. I mean, we've seen it over and over again. Yeah.
So to me, the passion economy, if in its fullest manifestation, whatever that would be, is a more stable economy because it's a much more diversified economy. You don't have as many like single points of failure. Like we saw, the financial system where we have a small handful of banks that make up the vast majority of global banking. They all make the same set of mistakes. They chase each other to profit from the same set of mistakes, and then they all collapse in the same way. I remember an economist telling me we'd have a better system if our banks were wildly irresponsible, but just each was irresponsible in a different way. And you would have diversification. And we still have an extremely top-heavy and topper-heavy. Like I was looking at some stats at the Fortune 500, the 500 biggest companies. I forget the exact numbers, but used to make up 50% of our economy. Now it's something like 66% of our economy. And so that has multiple problems. So you have like, just in a kind of engineering way, you have like concentrated points of failure, but then in a power way, concentrated wealth just does lead to political distortion. So I think it's very hard to predict how a recession will unfold. I will say, for me, if it's going to come, I'd rather it come sooner than later. And
but also the last tax plan gave away all of our surplus. So do we have a move to go to if another giant recession hits? I mean, can we go to quantitative easing? Can we go to can we buy,
Yeah, the language of central banking is the powder is dry. We don't have a lot of, we're still kind of almost got the gas pedal pressed all the way down and the car's moving, but it's, so, and yes, we've wildly, irresponsibly raised debt at a time of growth, and that's crazy. It's insane. So, and I guarantee that if through some miracle the Democrat is elected the next president, all we're going to be hearing from Republicans, but also from lots of centrist Democrats is, we got to break down the welfare state. We're about to, lose. We're going to be deeper and deeper in debt. So there's a book I really like, Why Nations Fail.
It's a great book.
Yeah.
You gave it to me. It's a great book.
My friend Daron Acemoglu is a professor at MIT, and it talks about a big sweeping economic history, and talks about periods where economies share their wealth somewhat, and periods where it's highly concentrated. And I think Daron would say, I think it's obvious, we're at a pivotal point. We're in a turning point, and I do believe, I tell the story in the book, it is possible today to profit from the passion economy. Lots more people could do it. But big picture, we do need, as like a society, to make the decisions that would support broad-based growth as opposed to concentrated growth. And the thing that makes me slightly optimistic, or at least less pessimistic, is when you've seen these other major changes, like say the shift from agriculture to industry, it just takes a long time. This is a multi-generational process, and so it today it does not feel like we're on the cusp of some major change in how.
You know, one of the great books that Adam recommended to me was what's it called? The Good Job Strategy?
Yeah, that's a great book.
It's an amazing book if you have a chance to check it out. Actually, not that long, right?
No, and easy to read. Zainab Ton.
What's her name?
Zainab Ton, also an MIT professor.
And it's an amazing book that shows how that if you treat your employees well, and you have a specific relationship with your customers, you actually do better. And she studied like 6, 7 companies, and it's a nice companion to the
it's a very similar
passion economy. It really talks about how, like, I think a little bit what's been lost with economics and consumer goods, and a lot of this is probably through advertising and marketing, is that personal connection. And I feel like that book and your book both remind us that it's an exchange. The story I always think of is I went to Greece on my honeymoon with my wife Shira, and we went to a store when we first got there, and we were like, yeah, can we have that? And the guy wouldn't talk to us. And we were like, yeah, can we get the bottle of water? And he was like, just looked at us. And we were like, how you doing? He was like, I'm good. And we were like, we're good too. We're here on our honeymoon. And he was like, oh, that's fantastic. What would you like? And we'd like that bottle of water. He goes, great. And then we learned, have you heard in Greece that like you have to have an exchange before there's a transaction? And we were like, that's beautiful. We're creepy, dirty Americans. And it was really like a beautiful moment. Awesome. And I feel like that essence is in your book. And I feel like the Good Job Strategy has that too, that connection isn't just a sort of, religious or personal thing, but it actually does lead to a better economy.
Yeah, and I think a healthier economy. Yeah. And her, she and Daron, I like, because sometimes you can feel like saying words like passion and I want connection. Oh, that's softy, lefty stuff, and there's serious business. But I like it when really smart economic writers are like, no, you business people are being stupid. Like, you could make more money doing it this way, and everyone will be better off.
We're going to go to some questions from the audience / commodities.
Yes.
We have a little exchange we go through before we do that here.
Oh, I love it.
Questions at Live Talks LA typically start with a W or an H, sometimes a D. They are generally short. There is no such thing as a two-part question. And tonight, only Adam McKay gets to ask the follow-up questions.
Wow. Oh, my God. I feel so powerful.
I was just wondering, when you were telling that story about the brush maker, it kind of was making me think, and I haven't read the book, so that would maybe be better if I had. But it makes me wonder a little bit about, sort of, I guess the elephant in the room would be the ethics behind charging, $6,000 or sort of an invented price just because someone values it, which seems like it kind of... So I guess like the question that leads to is like, I'm inspired by this idea, and I think a lot of people are too. I'm an artist, so I do, like direct marketing or whatever, like anyone in a band does, or a lot of visual artists do too. But it seems to me that it would engender a lot of like some ill feelings and competition when you find out like people, either from the person who's receiving the good, is like, oh, this cost you $10 and you just charged me $6,000. And also it seems like it could be chaotic within communities of human beings, because they'd be like, oh, well, Janine invented this product. She's making crazy profit for nothing. So I know you've thought about all this. So what is your thought on that sort of issue?
Yeah,
Great,
yeah, that's a great question. Yeah,
I think that's actually the essence of the entire debate
Yeah.
and question. I think you're 100% right. Yeah.
And I feel like pricing is this profound and crucial thing that everyone gets wrong. And it's like the number one, if I'm talking to some business person or some, and price also includes your salary. So I look at it in a different way. So Lance Chaney is spending an incredible amount of time searching for problems, creatively solving problems, and also understanding the industry, understanding new bristles that are coming out, understanding new glue technology. He's amassing this incredible body of knowledge, just like Jason Blummer went on a long journey to understand how to think about creative artists and how they think about money. And it's something he's continuing to do. And this idea that the value is cost plus, it's the physical objects and some reasonable hourly rate, would not allow you to value all that other stuff. So, so if Lance Chaney made a brush for that nuclear power plant for $12 and then sold it for, say, $24 or even $50, he's actually being unethical to his to the nuclear power plant and the others, because he's creating a condition where it's unsustainable for him to be solving these problems. And now value doesn't mean it's always $6,000, but for the nuclear power plant, he solved a multi-million-dollar problem and potentially $1 billion problem by avoiding a catastrophe.
So what you're really saying is, what's the price on innovation or ideas?
And if you base it on the value you are creating, so which is a ephemeral thing,
Yep.
then you will create more value for people. And so that nuclear power plant is happy to pay $6,000 because they solved this much, much more expensive product. That doesn't mean we all should charge $6,000 for everything and everything should be $6,000. That just was, in that context, an appropriate price. I think this idea that you price based on just cost plus is just a byproduct of that 20th century mass production economy, and really isn't applicable. Something Jason Blummer does with his clients, who are often graphic designers or ad agency people or whatever, who typically charge by the hour, and he'll walk them through, like, if you're a marketing person or web designer or something, it's often like the first 20 minutes or maybe the first 2 hours, you're adding enormous value because you're an expert and you know stuff. And this person is presenting you with a bunch of issues, and you might be solving massive problems, but then like hour 96 is just, you're just like doing kind of rote work. So why should you charge everything by the same hourly price? It will create an incentive to actually provide less value than the customers actually want.
So we have a friend in common who's one of the most brilliant editors in all of editing, Hank Corwin. And I was joking with Hank about 6 months ago. I was like, why doesn't, he really is one of the great editors of all time. He did like JFK, Tree of Life, all these amazing movies, and we've worked with him, and he's incredible.
And also just one of the best people.
One of the best people ever. And I was joking with Hank, and I'm like, why doesn't every movie or TV show that's in trouble just give you $1 million to like fix it? And he like giggled, and then later there was a movie that was in trouble that gave him, he was like, I don't want to do that. And they gave him a bunch of money. I won't say the movie or whatever. And he fixed it, and it became a hit movie. And so it's a tricky thing in that line of like, what is the idea worth versus the value? I think you nailed it exactly. And in this town, in Los Angeles, it's really apparent because you have people with ideas. Like, you know, you're some schmo walking around, and then that idea is worth so much money. Yeah, I think that's exactly the transference. That kind of ratio is kind of the key to what you're talking about with the passion economy.
And the other thing, I mean, the way I think about it is it's an ongoing relationship. So it's, IP and copyright probably play a role, but it's not about capturing like this, I own this and you have to pay me. It's like, I'm going to continue to pay, to create that value.
Next question.
Hi. Sorry in advance for diverting the conversation from the passion economy to Donald Trump on Today of All Days. But Adam, you wrote about what you described as his worst deal yet in The New Yorker, describing his business dealings in the country of Georgia, relationship to organized crime, financing from potentially the Quds Force in Iran. Are you planning to revisit that story now that you're done with this? Are we going to revisit it? I feel like that was a big fucking deal, and we've sort of forgotten about it.
By the way, I totally
Thank you.
agree. I thought that was a monumental piece and a scary moment that America just let it roll right by. But anyway, you go.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I feel like I did establish, and the Trump organization actually fully conceded that they were part of a money laundering operation for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps through the election. Like it started in 2011. They say they didn't learn that it was this until 2015, but they continued to be part of the deal for the entire election and killed the deal in December after Trump was elected. And when I asked, why didn't you pull out when you learned you were probably supporting the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the lawyer, their chief counsel said, oh, well, we had a contract. You can't violate a contract. I was like, I think you can. I think as a general rule, if you find out, yeah. So, look, it's a tough time for investigative journalists who focus on Trump because you feel impotent, and you feel like, my view is we don't need really more information. We just need to share the information we know. I'd say there's sort of a team of people, David Fahrenthold at The Post, Andrea Bernstein with Trump Inc. at WNYC, a bunch of people at ProPublica. There's a bunch of us who talk all the time, and we feel pretty confident that the Trump organization is at base a criminal organization that transitioned in the 2000s to become, as its primary goal, providing a big gold mask for incredibly awful money laundering operations for some of the worst people on earth. But it is hard not to feel like, who cares? Like, what am I going to find out that's more than that? Like, I think that you eventually I covered the Iraq War. I was in Iraq for a year, and we knew it was a disaster before that word got out, and it took a while, but eventually America figured that out. I do think at some point this fever breaks, but it is just a very hard time to be an investigative reporter on the Trump beat. It just feels like, what's the point? Yeah, it's tough. Yeah.
Next question.
Yeah.
Next question.
Okay, so I'm going to bring it back to the economy. I wanted to ask you, my understanding is that from studying economics when I was in college, which was a long time ago, but that the marketplace is really what sets the pricing. So that, if you want a bar of soap and a normal price is $1, you can probably find a market that's going to sell it for $600, but that's going to be a small market, and it's questionable whether you're going to find those people. But I understand in the new economy that you might be able to find those customers. But what I wanted to ask is, I see the bigger threat is really the accumulation of wealth, and that most companies now are, either monopolies or they're a group of several companies that take over an industry like banking and such. So what I wanted to ask you is, I see that as a threat. So I just wanted to know if you feel that way, and if so or if not, how does it relate to your book and your concept of the way the economy should be functioning?
Yeah, I mean, the kind of catch-all term is market power, that there's companies that, whether it's through monopoly or corruption or exploiting regulation or whatever, they have power that's independent of like the value they're creating. They're able to set prices or restrict competition. I will say I have spent part of my career in countries that really have, like we have a major problem in America. I don't want to belittle that, but Iraq under Saddam Hussein, truly the only things sold were things that Saddam or one of his cronies wanted to be sold. And so I've seen the worst version of it, and we don't have the worst version. We do have scope for entrepreneurship and new innovation and bottom-up growth. It's not as much as it should be. I would like a lot more. There's serious market power, but there's also very serious scope. And I think the people in my book have found that there's a place where you're big enough, your market is big enough to make a living, but not so big that some big company is going to come in and swallow it whole. And that I think that there are a lot of places for that kind of Goldilocks, big enough but not too big. But what I will say is this book in Silicon Valley, one of the biggest insults is lifestyle business, which they define as a business that isn't trying to become $1 billion valuation, high growth business. Oh, that's a lifestyle business. Now, a lifestyle business can still be a business that makes millions of dollars and you have a really nice life, but that's lifestyle. This book is not about crazy growth. If you want crazy growth, I do think you want market power and you want to be doing a lot of stuff. But I do think there's a lot of space, and more space than people are taking advantage of, even in this very troubled economy right now. We could have a lot of policies that would make that better. I mean, just one obvious one is healthcare. Like, it's insane that this country is probably filled with ambitious, curious people with interesting ideas who have to stay in a job that isn't ideal because to leave it, their family might die. Like, that's crazy. It's insane. It's bad on market grounds. It's bad on humanitarian grounds. It's just crazy. And though there's a lot of structures like that in our economy that could change, that could make this easier and better. But even without that, we do have a very nimble economy if you're small enough to not draw the attention of big players.
God, that's depressing.
It is and it isn't. There's a lot.
If you're eating ants within a rotten log and the Wolverine can't see you.
But you can have a really good life at that place. You can have a really good life.
I mean, these forces scare the shit out of me, man. I mean, I agree with you. There's market distortion all over the place. And to see what's going on now, where like all the tax breaks go to the conglomerates and the monopolies, and then it goes the other way. But at the same time, I agree with you. I do think reality wins in the end. I do think people want good shit. Like, they don't, I think there's a point at which someone's eating a hamburger and they say, well, I mean, you saw it with McDonald's. I mean, McDonald's actually had to back up and start making real hamburgers because people were like, this is horrible. I mean, that actually happened.
Yeah.
So I agree with you, but man, like.
But it's, I mean, this is the tricky thing about having optimism at a time like this, that I feel as a citizen and a father and a husband, like, I have an obligation to do what I can to change government and change policy, and I have my values, and I have the things that the candidates I'd vote for, and there are solutions that aren't going to be bottom up, but there also are real bottom up opportunities. And if you look at,
I agree.
If you look at what happened, the 1880s to say 1920s was a tough time for the Industrial Revolution. Like it it would have been reasonable to be like, I think agriculture was better. Like, life seemed a lot better. And we got, you know, the 5-day work week, we got the 8-hour work day, we got
Unions, by the way.
yeah,
Unions.
It's unions, it's
We need unions back
individuals
as
getting
well.
education.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of bottom up activity that softened the cruelty of the early industrial revolution. And I think that can happen. Like that bottom up, it's not ultimately you need laws, you know, but FDR said, make me change the laws.
Yeah.
You need to force me to do it. It has to come up. And so for me, the kind of entrepreneurial approach that I celebrate in this book is, you know, what I like about the people in this book, and some are very left-wing, some are right-wing, some are Christian, some are secular, some are this, some are that, but
Some are Satanists.
some are Satanists.
There's actually a
it's
disproportionate.
mostly Satanists. Yeah,
It's a weird part of your book. But anyway,
Yeah.
keep going.
Yeah.
Keep going.
but they're seeing something. They're not. These aren't intellectuals. These aren't economists. But they're seeing something. They're articulating something, and then they're creating conditions to thrive in that economy. And those are lessons we can take. And so I don't know that there's a contradiction. Like if we all just wait for the government to fix it, we'll wait a very, very long time. And we won't really know how to fix it because there won't be enough solutions. So I see both of those things working hand in.
I mean, you're seeing it with global warming right now. I mean, global warming obviously is like, you know, the most pressing issue bearing down on all of us. And what are you seeing? A government that's ignoring it because it's bought off, but you're seeing the private industry take action. You're seeing certain oligarchs take action. It's not ideal. You want everything operating in concert. But at the same time, a friend of mine met with Bill Gates a couple weeks ago, and he said to me, what do you want me to ask him? And I was like, why isn't every dime you have going towards carbon capture? And my friend actually said, a lot of his money's going towards carbon capture. So I agree. Do we have one more
Final question for the evening.
Final question? Make it really, really good.
Okay, this is. Hi, Adam
no
Davidson. I went to college with you, so it's been 30 years. Hello, I'm Craig Shanak. Good to see
Oh,
you.
hey, yeah, hey. He's a really funny guy. McKay. You should hire him.
University of Chicago.
Yes,
Yeah,
University of Chicago. It
Yeah.
would not be Hollywood if I didn't say
He was the funniest guy in college.
Thank you.
He
I
truly
appreciate
was.
that.
Improv guy.
It would
He's
not.
hilarious.
You wouldn't just say
I know,
that.
I have to say that's a big compliment. It wouldn't be Hollywood without somebody offering you the rights to buy just the preface of your book to make the two Stanleys.
Yeah.
Which would be a great movie, by the way. Adam, I love you direct. Talk to me after. Here's my actual question about the book. It is strange to write a book that is optimistic right now. And I'm very glad you wrote this book because I kind of participate in what I think is the passion economy. But did you interview anyone for the book that didn't make it in the book because they didn't quite make it? I'm kind of curious about that.
That's a great question.
Yeah, that's a very good question.
Thank you.
But not
just
funny.
funny.
I remember you as
Not
being
as
really
funny.
funny. Yeah.
Could have said that question in a high-pitched English accent. It would have helped.
Let me ask you a question.
Right away.
Yeah.
Right away.
Yeah,
No,
no,
that
he
actually
really-
is a great question.
great question.
And I had the same thought when you were talking about the brush guy with NASA.
Yeah.
And then you interviewed another guy who was a brush guy who didn't do that,
Right,
and his
who
factory
failed.
shut down.
Yeah.
I'm like, is there a part of the structure that you're talking about that is inherently kind of, for lack of a better word, like boutique or artisanal? Like, can there only be one specific winner within that range? Which I think is a little bit. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, well, first of all, like everyone in the book had lots of failures, and I wanted to point out this is not all of these people struggled and took them a long time to figure things out, but I think if I can, like the way you ask that question is kind of assuming monopoly sort of thing. Like
That's true.
If you think of brushes as, oh, there's going to be one company eventually that's going to make all the brushes, then yeah, if one then every other company is not going to be. But if you have all these different people solving different kinds of brush problems, then you will have lots more companies. And again, that would be a healthier economy, et cetera. But it is an economy that has more failure. And that could be that could be a good thing, because it is more robust to have a lot of smaller players who are failing and succeeding and failing and succeeding. I do think that this economy, the big thing that the 20th century delivered, uniquely in human history, is a long period of reasonable stability where it became natural, for the only time in human history, for a large percentage of the population to just think that the natural course of things is kids make more money than their parents, 40-year-olds make more money than 20-year-olds, 60-year-olds make more money than 40-year-olds, that there's this kind of wind at your back, that the standard thing is you experience growth over the course of your career, your kids will grow even further. That is not the human condition. The human condition is hustling every single day to get enough calories to survive, and worrying about weather, and worrying about, and I think that this economy, I think that stability is shattering and won't return. So I don't think the passion economy is going to be equivalent in that sense, where, oh, okay, I just got to figure out my passion, and boom, I'm done, and now I'll be rich, I'll be fine for the next 20 years. It is going to require a constant vigilance, and this is, and a constant hustle. I actually want to call the book The Hustle Economy, but my editor thought that was could be misconstrued. But and I now run a company, and I have millennial workers, and they're different from how I was when I was a worker. You know, when I was in my early 20s, like, I just wanted to kiss my boss's ass all the time, and I have.
By the way, his company manufactures tear gas.
Yeah.
Just in case you're wondering.
Yeah. But we just got that
It's
North
great.
Korea contract.
It's
I told you
great
about.
tear gas.
Yeah,
It's the best.
Yeah.
It's the best.
Yeah. But
And he's a great boss, but it's tear gas.
It's tear gas.
Yeah.
Which helps with management. But but I've learned to I really like it when millennial staff are like, no, I think we should do it this way. Now, sometimes I want them to do it a different way, but I think I take that, like, we complain about millennials and entitled and blah, blah, blah. I take it as, they're learning, they're already figuring out that they have a different deal than I did. Like, implicit in me kind of kissing my boss's ass when I was 23 was, I just have to go through this hazing process, and then I'm just one of those people who's going, and I think there's just an intuition now among younger people that, I'm going to be in this fight. This guy happens to be my boss now, but I'm in this fight for the rest of my life. And I have to acquire skills, and I have to advocate for myself. And I think that's very healthy. I do happen to have two people who work for me in the audience, and I want you to just do what I tell you. I think. But yes, failure is embedded. Failure is part of it, and this does get into, my political values, that a stronger social safety net, a system that allows for even a basic income, that we are a rich enough country that we can provide a cushioning that would actually make all of us better off, because it would allow people to take the kinds of risks. And
it would spur innovation.
It would spur innovation, et cetera.
The same way corporations were created to give a safety net for people to take risks without it being about their life, the same thing is with a social safety net.
Yeah.
I don't want to have the last word. You have the last word. No.
Great. Well, thank you all very, very much. Thank you.
That was a good last word.
Okay. Thank you.
Adam Davidson, ladies and gentlemen, The Passion Economy. What a pleasure. Thank you all so much for coming out.